Sometimes the power of Jesus is made apparent by what he doesn't do. And here's a great example. John 19, Jesus has been arrested. Pilate has had him flogged, and the religious leaders are still not appeased because as soon as Pilate brings out Jesus bloody and beaten, the people still shout, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate, the Roman governor, says, "I can't crucify him legally. There's no charge. I have no basis to crucify this man. So you take him and crucify him," which of course they don't have the legal right to do. So basically they're playing off of each other. And then as soon as he says that, the Jewish leaders insisted, hey, we have a law. It's our law from Leviticus that if you claim to be the Son of God, you must be stoned to death. So the religious leaders are citing Jesus, accusing him of blasphemy because you can't say you're God, by the way, unless you are God, which Jesus is God. So the charge is false. Nonetheless, they don't realize that. Pilate is a superstitious guy, and so instead of hearing this and considering it, he sees it as a threat because he thinks he's being haunted by some sort of ghost. And so it says in verse 8 of John 19 that when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. He went back inside the palace where Jesus is currently bound and bleeding, and he said, "Hey, Jesus, where do you come from?" And Jesus gave no answer. And that's the word of the Lord. Why would Jesus not give an answer? Back in those days, if you were to ask somebody, "Where are you from?" and if they said nothing, it was usually because they were ashamed of saying where they were from. Jesus is not ashamed. Jesus is functioning in the obedience of the Father. He's living the perfect human life. And honestly, his location in Nazareth, like his earthly ground zero, like home base is something to be ashamed of for some people, but for Jesus, it's part of his grand humility. But that's not what Pilate is asking. He's not saying, "Where on the map are you from?" He's saying, "Where in the spiritual world are you from?" And Jesus gives no answer. He says nothing. This does not help Pilate's peace or his sense of the fact that it's going to be okay, because it's not. So when Jesus says nothing, he displays incredible power. Because there are times where we will ask Jesus a question and he will say nothing because he doesn't have to, because he doesn't want to, because we wouldn't understand. Maybe it's because he kind of told Pilate already. He said, "My kingdom is from another place." Maybe it was that he knew that Pilate wouldn't understand the answer anyway. Maybe it was simply that Jesus is showing his authority by not submitting to this bizarre, broken process. Nonetheless, there are times where Jesus will say nothing. There's great power in God's silence, and we can trust him even in that, as scary as it is, because only in total power and authority would he stay silent and steady, and only in obedience and trust would we respond even to God's silence and say, "It's okay, I still trust you." Just something to think about. That's RadCast.